Welcome in everyone. This is the final Yorick guide I'll ever produce and my ultimatum of everything I've done in these past years of League. It will encompass everything that I know about Yorick and all the tips and tricks I have developed throughout these years.
What kind of tips and tricks do you need for a dab-nab Yorick guide?
Here's the most simple. Let me stop you there. Do you know anything about Maiden AI tower manipulation? Or even how the Maiden AI even works? Do you even know how Ghoul AI works? God damn, you're an idiot. Do you know what the 8 Ghoul setup is? Disappointing. How could you not even know the basics? Lowly creature, you're lucky. Your lucky slag dag is gonna teach you how to play Yorick in this guide. I'm gonna teach you the very basics, from what your abilities do to technology that even the finest Yorick players might not know. Now, I'll introduce myself. I'm the best Yorick in the world. I've been Challenger for 5 seasons, hitting Challenger in EU West, OS, Masters on NA of 200 ping, and later this year, I'll be going to Korea to claim my throne there. I invented the current meta build of Lethality Yorick, which is used from all the way of NA to Korea. With that being said, let's get right into this guide. So firstly, I'll cover over who Yorick is, introduce him to you guys, you might not know him. He's a nice little fella, I've played him for a few couple years. Tell you guys the items and runes before the game starts. Then I'll talk about the basics and fundamentals of how to play Yorick. And then the very many Yorick unique IDs, strats and techniques that I will teach to you. I've kept this hidden for a very long time, and even my previous Yorick guide, I didn't talk about it. You can learn this all at your own pace, and if you ever feel, man, I want some friends, get out of playing Yorick. Or you can join my Discord, because there's a lot of other Yorick players there as well. You could also do that. With that being said, welcome to the Yorick Entourage. Now you may have thought, what the hell does Entourage mean? I don't know, but Yorick is an assassin, bruiser, AD carry, necromancer mage with one of the highest DPS in the game with right setup and insanely strong bursts. Now let's just slow it down. What the hell? A necromancer mage? Yep, Yorick is heavily reliant on landing his skill shot ability where he tosses sand, which then attracts his main damage source, being ghouls. He's the only champion that has several moving pets as his main identity. All his damage is based on using these little ghoulings. So that means he has really good range compared to the average bruiser and can poke very well because of this. With standard juggernauts, you're a girthy man that holds the front line while being a very solid tanky beast. With Yorick though, you have no tankiness in your kit at all. So instead, the strategy for me is you go full AD and make the ghouls do 1 billion damage. Also, he can make cages, so that's kind of kinky if you're into that sort of stuff. Wow, that's pretty cool. Yorick can make kinky cages and do long range damage of ghouls? What's the downside? Well, this is the problem, Yorick. Being reliant on ghouls is as equal a weakness as it is a strength. Champions that can easily deal with ghouls destroy Yorick, and setting them up in itself can be difficult, especially in team fights and early game situations. But if you set up correctly and the enemy cannot deal with ghouls, he is probably one of the most overpowered champions in the game. Stats speak themselves. He has 50,000% win rate in low elo, and every now and then I'll get a country gremlin complaining about Yorick. The good thing about seeing people complain about Yorick is that you can instantly tell what rank they are. Although this seems daunting because he is quite contrary to the normal average Juggernaut champion, he's really easy to pick up and has an insanely high skill cap. In fact, there is almost no reason you shouldn't pick him up. He's great as a casual champion and amazing to one trick due to the many things you can learn. And also, he's just a badass. Why wouldn't you want to play this big, hulked, roided up creature? God, I just want to lick the sweat off his abs. Okay, let's just talk about the basics of Yorick. For the runes, go to this Conqueror page. It makes your all-ins deadly and is by far his most consistent page. There are other rune pages I like, such as Comet for poking and being a troll, and also going first strike to one-shot the enemy to also be a troll. But stick with Conqueror because it's just incredibly amazing in Yorick. I'm gonna have a screenshot of all the different Yorick builds you can go, but Dustblade is particularly good because it makes the ghouls spit acid, and Trini in the second build is really good because it shits out bricks. So every game we go Mythic first. I know they're getting removed next season, but for the sake of this guide's items to not be dated, Triforce is never ever a bad item. It is a staple of Yorick and will stay that way, it seems, for future generations. Additionally, unless they're hard rework, Grudge Cleaver, and Hullbreaker, they are by far Yorick's best items, due to Ghouls proccing Cleaver Grudge and Hullbreaker giving every stat known to mankind. Lethality is incredibly strong stat in Yorick because it works with Ghouls and so does Armor Pen, and I foresee as long as Eclipse and Dustblade don't change too much, they will remain as his 2 best items. But as of right now, Triforce for consistent damage, big damage for Duskblade, and Eclipse for in between. Okay, now that's enough of the boring stuff. Let's get onto the main course, baby. Yorick himself. And again, I have to reiterate, for runes, only go Conqueror, just stick with Conqueror. Now there may be some questions about runes as well, like why do you go Alacrity? When you're at a tower and hitting it, do you want attack speed, tenacity, or lifesteal? Enough said. Why conditioning? Well, honestly, this could be swapped out for Bone Plating and Second Wind, but conditioning, baby, scaling. Enough said. If you're feeling adventurous, see the other pages. I'm not going to explain it because it will take too long, but that's it for runes. Now let's get on to... Hey, Slugdog, you forgot summoner spells, Slummer. TP Ignite every game, TP for those juicy macro plays, and Ignite for burning and killing the enemy. But a longer explanation later. Now let's get on to... In Yorick's passive, there are 2 parts to the ability. Let's get into the first part. Yorick can have up to 4 ghouls. Ghouls have AD and health, which scale with Yorick's level and also increase based on his AD and health. They will follow Yorick when summoned, but the second they see any enemy, they will run and attack them. Their attacks do damage, which can also proc effects like Grudge and Cleaver. Unfortunately, they can't crit though, or actually proc on-hit effects like Balk. This is important later down the line, but let's talk about how we get ghouls, which is the second part of his passive. Graves are spawned passively every few deaths of minions and monsters, which goes down based on your level. Large monsters and champions are guaranteed to spawn a grave. After 3 graves are active, Yorick can awaken them with Q2, which can be used when you're near the graves and after you use your Q. They can also be awakened through Yorick landing E on a large monster or champion, which is probably about 90% of the time the way you're going to be using ghouls. Note that also a maximum of 4 graves can only be active. These ghouls is Yorick's main identity. I cannot emphasize enough how important ghouls are to Yorick. In League of Legends, all the pet champions don't really give a shit about the pets. Annie, part of their main combo. Zyra, extra perk. With Yorick, ghouls is your life, your wife, your bread, your butter. If you don't have ghouls, you're basically just a large cannon minion that can spawn cages. So keep this in mind if I ask you to take anything from this guide, is that ghouls equals important. Also, we're gonna be talking a lot about ghouls, so yeah. Q. Yorick Sync's auto attack deals more damage and heals a tiny bit. It also spawns a grave after you kill a unit. The most simple move in Yorick's kit, Smash! Not much to it, but there is a surprising amount of decision making needed in this skill. It has a really long cooldown early levels, and it's also the one of 2 damaging abilities in your kit early game. In the laning phase, you have to make the decision between queuing the enemy for poke or getting graves to set up for a big all-in. You're gonna find a lot of this conundrum scattered of Yorick. Spend time to set up and go to a fight late and be in a really strong state, or go straight to the fight and be there faster, but be significantly weaker because you didn't have time to set up. Also, I said Q2 earlier, which is the second part of this ability. If you have 3 plus graves around you, you can press this ability when it's on cooldown to awaken ghouls. W, Yorick places a cage. It breaks after 4 seconds, or if the enemy breaks it by autoing it. Its health starts at 2 but goes up to 4 based on levels. This is one of the strongest abilities in the game. Being able to put down terrain to cage the enemy or to block out certain areas is a really powerful tool. It elevates the skill ceiling in many matchups as well. What do you mean? Skill? I'll give an example. One of Yorick's harder matchups, Mordekaiser, is a struggle because he can send you to the Shadow Realm, removing your ghouls and Maiden. So how do you deal with him? You just play Ring Around and Rosie with Cage. And suddenly, the matchup becomes so much easier. You have to think of Yorick W as an MMA ring. Just because you can place dudes inside it, doesn't mean you can't use that ring to make distance between you and the enemy. But Slugdog, can't I block my teammates? Nope. Yorick W, your teammates can walk through it, which is really useful because you don't need to worry about screwing over your team with W placement. E. Yorick throws a pile of sewage at the enemy, dealing % health damage and attracts ghouls to goon squat the enemy, dealing extra damage to enemies hit. Now you may have heard me earlier, it spawns graves in the ground and makes them jump at the enemy. So one thing you can do is E them and create graves while they're marked. And the graves you create will spawn ghouls and they will continue to jump at them. This makes it one of the most frustrating and confusing things to go against. It's Yorick's main way of engaging poking and a tool which makes it so that Yorick is actually pretty good into ranged champions. The projectile speed is pretty fast and can go relatively far, but the weird shape can make it hard to land. It's shaped in a way so that the beginning is thin and then expands outwards. So I'll offer some advice because every now and then I see a country goblin come in and ask, "Slumdog, what are your secrets to landing E?" So the first tip is really simple, and let's just do out of vision. When you're out of vision, the enemy has less time to react to it. This isn't a Yorick tip per se, as much as it is a general tip in League and in life. When you want to give somebody a nice present, surprise! Birthday party them. When you want to fight somebody, surprise attack them. Mild advice, please don't surprise attack me, because I'll always be expecting it. Anyways, what we're talking about, oh shit, landing the E ability. Predict the enemy's movement. It's as simple as that. If you know where they're going, then you can know where to E. In laning phase, you have to be insanely observant of how the enemy is moving, and the second they do any movement skills, or you predict where they're going, throw that bunch of bath and... Okay, these are just general tips though. Let me truly teach you how to aim your E. The shaft of your E is really small, so you want to get the bigger tip of the E right into the enemy. Aim for the tip. Don't use the shaft. You can do this by using the E closer to you. This also has a second effect where it lands faster. Because Yorick E is a projectile, the closer you launch it to you, the faster it lands. This means if you do it right in front of your feet, it's pretty much instant. So remember, always insert the tip right in the enemy's face. Finally, the ult. Yorick summons Ghouls and Maiden, which does magic damage to nearby enemies or targets Yorick hits. Additionally, if Yorick hits a unit that Maiden is also damaged, Yorick deals a pretty beefy amount of percent health magic damage, and also any unit that dies in Maiden's range spawns a Ghoul, which is unbelievably useful as Ghouls, who would have thought, are pretty good for Yorick. After 10 seconds of spawning Maiden, you can release it by recasting R, and it'll run down the nearest lane and push it until it dies. Little advice right now, do not press the button. I'll later teach the applications of how to use it, but in general right now, if you want her to hang around and actually be useful, don't recast R. Also, contrary to popular belief, Maiden actually has its own AI, which isn't directly controllable, but instead has to be manipulated, which I'll also teach later on. Now that we got the champion's abilities down, let's go over the combos and strats in Yorick. And we're about to touch on his combos, which is so easy, a toddler could do them. Okay now, this is the first combo, the most basic combo. Auto Q. Yep, simple like that. In League of Legends, you can cancel the animation to delay between your auto attacks with an animation cancel of an auto attack resetter. And that is Yorick's Q. It's an absolute vital skill in Yorick because you are going to be doing this almost all the time. It affects your DPS, your burst, your tower taking, your trading, everything. The faster you can do it, the better. Second, the EW auto Q. Pretty simple. E spawns Ghouls and slows the enemy and allows you to place your W around them, and the auto Q allows you to do damage. It's the most consistent combo he has, and the combo you're going to be doing 99% of the time. If you're scared of missing E, you can WE auto Q, but the weakness to this combo is because you W first, you leave a lot more counterplay, with the enemy being able to kill the wall or dashing away before your Ghouls can awaken from your E. You can also ER, which lets Ghouls that spawn from Maiden jump at the enemy for guaranteed poke. And of course, if you spawn more Ghouls, they'll continue to jump at the enemy. That's it! It is simple as that! Yorick combos are easy! Now I'll be explaining how to play the different phases of Yorick's game. In the early game, you always want to set up Graves and Ghouls before fighting. Yorick has very little damage to work with if he doesn't have any Ghouls, and thus is very reliant upon them. In fact, you are so weak that 95% of the time, you want to learn E level 1 and just last hit minions with it. That's how weak Yorick is in the early levels. With that being said, you usually want to spend the first 3 levels trying to get Graves and just farming with E. In this time, we're very weak, but we're also telling the enemy laner, hey man, I'm very weak, please don't hurt me. So we're mentally and psychologically conditioning the enemy to not hurt us. And level 4 is where the ball drops. Throw that E and oh shit, if you miss the E, just walk away because then your Ghouls don't do anything. But if you land that E, go to town on the enemy. Go to all the brothels and become the harem master. Become the king of the land and crush any opponent that tries to meet you. But yeah, Yorick with 4 Ghouls, pretty good all in. If you are or aren't able to get a kill, level 6 you have 2 positions to put the enemy in. You can either summon Maiden and this will perma push the wave and you can threaten the enemy with E-poke under tower. Or you can choose not to summon Maiden and try to hold a freeze in front of your tower, and if the enemy walks up you can summon Cthulhu upon them. It's hard to pick between these 2 options, so it's going to be up to you to decide whether you do it or not. Note though, if you summon Maiden, you cannot undo it and you just have to leave her out. As you play more and more, you gather more experience and you can kind of think in your own head, hey, summoning Maiden's a pretty good position here. Or, hey, summoning Maiden is a terrible decision here. Regardless, once you poke the enemy out of lane or you're able to kill the enemy, you want to eat the most delicious fruit in League of Legends. Plates. plates are like girls or guys with a significant other. Just because there's somebody there defending them doesn't mean you can't get it. So how do you get these plates? Well, firstly, you want to get rid of this person in the way of making out with a beautiful plate. So another solution is harassing them until they go away. Both are very solid options. You can do stuff like inviting your buddy to beat them up with you or telling their parents. Many options work, but regardless, being with that person is the end goal. Is this one big analogy of how I got my girlfriend stolen from me? Let's move on. After you get plates at a top tower, try to get plates in other lanes as well. If it's too risky or you're scared that your teammates are going to be too stupid or toxic to get it, you can try to get jungle camps instead and go for T2 towers in top lane. Now T2 towers are great because they're worth 600 buckaroos, which is worth 2 entire kills. And monsters are great because not only do you get yourself money and EXP, you also deny the enemy of getting the camps. And of course, you can always get Herald. 90% of the time, no one cares about Herald, so usually after you get your tower, you can quickly pick it up and then do something in another lane. This is all in order to get yourself as far ahead as possible. The more ahead you are, the more they need to send to stop you. And the more they need to send for you, the better. But Slum Didgeridoo, there are 2 T2 towers in bot lane and top lane, so which one should I aim for? This is quite a complex answer, but the general rule of thumb is to always aim for the one opposite of the main objective that's alive. For example, let's say Herald is up but Dragon isn't, then the enemy and your teammates would naturally gravitate towards Herald. So then you should go bot lane to try to go for T2 tower there. Vice versa, if Dragon is up and Baron isn't, then go top lane. If teammates aren't going for the big objective and instead going to your lane, tell them to f off, and if your teammates and the enemy aren't going for big objectives, then you yourself can grab that Baron, grab that Dragon for yourself. Yorick is really good at soloing objectives as long as you have Maiden out because of his insane DPS. I'll explain later how to optimize clearing Dragon and Baron efficiently. Also, if your teammates and your enemy are just duking it out and you've already cleared the 2-2 towers, there's no reason to stop pushing. Keep going at it until you see the enemy backing or they're just mysteriously missing from the map. If you're at your own base and doing nothing and your teammate randomly starts a fight, you have 2 options. TP near your team and help them out, or win the game and teleport and backdoor. It's obvious which choice to pick out. Realistically, the only time I group and help my teammates is if I'm really behind and completely useless to the point that they can send their support to deal with me, or if I see our team comps just better. The mindset I have with Yorick is, if I am not ahead, I am behind. This greedy, hungry goblin playstyle will let you have the 1v9 games of the century or the biggest pile of doggy doo-doo in your entire generation. Regardless, this means if the enemy's high level has more items at any point in the game, my mental plummets into the ground. Yorick is a juggernaut who only has damage. He has no tankiness, no CC, and therefore, if you do not get ahead, you're just a sack of flesh. Out of every other Yorick main, I farm more jungle camps and minions more than anyone else, and greed like a slavering dog more than any other Yorick player. I get my Grumps, I get my Krugs, and you gotta get them too. Speaking of Grump though, here's a little strategy for getting Grump. You can E-Grump with 4 ghouls, and from pretty much any point of the game, they will solo it from full XP no matter how behind you are. This is really useful because it's a time save, free money XP, and why wouldn't you do it? This works with every other camp too, even Dragon. But multi-camps like Wolves, Raptors, and Krugs is a little bit more difficult because after your ghouls kill that one marked target, they'll just go back to you because they're dumb little dogs. With that being said though, remember, you gotta stay on top of that curve. While everybody else is fighting and messing around, you'll be getting stronger and stronger. Also, I will finally give out my big tip because this question is asked a billion times. What do you do to win 1v2s, 1v3s, and how do you push the enemy out of lane to take tower? The secret to doing this is through Graves preparation, which I'll explain right now. Graves preparation is as simple as last hitting minions and spawning Graves. However, the trick is to have ghouls and Graves out. The normal Yorick main's optimal situation for Yorick is that he has 4 ghouls and Maiden out. However, the truly optimal situation for Yorick is for him to have 4 ghouls and 4 Graves out while having Maiden not active but ready to be used at any time. This is why you might catch me a lot of times on stream and on videos not ulting, because effectively if I ever get into that situation, I have 12 ghouls on demand and can just send a complete avalanche of ghouls at the enemy. If they are under tower, all you need to do is land one good E and they're swarmed with 4 ghouls which may die. But as I stated earlier, Yorick's E awakens new ghouls in the graves, and so even if they kill the ghouls, they'll continue to get jumped by the graves. And finally, if they clear those as well, you can use ult to summon even more ghouls, and at this point, it's just way too overwhelming. Think about it. If you're a big hunk strong guy, you could probably take on a few cows. But if there were 12 cows to fight you, how the hell are you gonna do anything? Moral of the story is, remember to set up graves and to not fight cows, because you never know. Maybe 8 more cows will come out of the ground. Finally, the reason why I do so well in Yorick is that I am really good at mechanically and macro with Yorick. That's weird. Yorick doesn't have much mechanics. Yeah, you're right. If it wasn't for the goddamn Maiden's stupid AI. From the very first game of Yorick, people will understand the pain of what the hell is Maiden doing. Knowing how to micro Maiden through movement and correct inputs are both incredibly complex skills that makes your Yorick seem like a deranged weirdo with terrible movement. So I'm going to explain to you how the AI of Maiden works. Maiden naturally follows you and has a certain radius around her that when you are within the range of, she will hit whatever is nearest to her. Then when you leave that radius around her, she will of course follow you back. However, there are 2 exceptions to this rule. When Yorick hits a unit, the Maiden will try to hit that unit for 2 full seconds and will not give a shit what you do for those 2 seconds. This, a lot of the time, is what causes Maiden's deaths, and will be the thing that screws you over. In order to counteract this, you can hit something else, and instead it will hit that unit for 2 seconds. So what I do is I might hit the enemy champion for a little quickie, and then I hit a minion that's about to die or low health, and Maiden will switch targets, but because that unit is dead, it will go back to my control. And now you can safely get Maiden to follow you. Now the second exception to Maiden naturally following you is that if you E the enemy and Maiden is within a certain radius of the enemy, she will gun for the enemy unit until the E mark ends. This is probably what kills Maiden most frequently, because you want to poke with E at the enemy under tower, and then Maiden is a mega moron and it just dies. So how do we counteract this? There are 3 ways on different levels of difficulty. The first one is, just don't E. Maiden will never chase the enemy for eternity if you never even give it the opportunity to. Of course you might miss out on a lot of damage and end up in a stalemate, but this is actually a pretty effective tactic. Unless you're confident and all in, waiting for the enemy to make a mistake is always a solid option, but we're big balls Yorick players, so this is not good enough. The second tactic is to place Maiden behind you to avoid getting into that radius of the enemy, then toss the E for ghouls to poke the enemy. So how Maiden AI works is that she will always face your back, because that's how following people works. When you chase somebody, you're facing their back. Maiden's facing your back. This is important down the line for another strategy, but keep this in mind. Anyways, you just face the enemy, land the E, and oftentimes Maiden won't be in the range of the radius around the enemy to chase the enemy, because usually the enemy will be running away from ghouls and not in range. This only works at certain ranges, so you should be going for max range E's if you're gonna do this. But even if Maiden does start chasing, because she's so far behind, it will take her a really long time to even get to the enemy, and by the time she gets to the enemy, you can start running away and she'll chase back towards you. Now the final strategy is ridiculous. This is Maiden manipulation, where you bounce aggro between you and Maiden so that the tower doesn't aim at Maiden and it doesn't get damaged at all. This is one of Yorick's hardest techs, if not the hardest, but it lets you effectively protect Maiden from full HP and get ridiculous dives off. I'll explain the technicalities of the aggro system works, as it is vital in order to do this strat. When Maiden or ghouls hit the enemy champion on the tower, they will receive aggro, with Maiden taking priority over ghouls. However, if Yorick is in the range of the tower, Yorick will take the aggro. So what you're doing is basically having Maiden hit the enemy and take aggro, and then you walk on the tower right as Maiden hits the enemy, but instead of her getting aggro, you get aggro because you're in the range and you're prioritized. And you repeat this process, and it lets you poke the enemy really hard on the tower or go for insane dives, because this strategy also protects the ghouls under tower. I would recommend doing this on cannon waves, as cannon minions are really tanky and are prioritized really high up on the tower ecosystem between your pets. And that is how you protect the men from not inting into the enemy champions under the tower. It's a pretty general rule for Yorick as well. If you know you're weak in the enemy and have Maiden out, don't eat the enemy. You're pretty much guaranteeing your Maiden to run it down into a free $50 for the enemy. There's also another Maiden manipulation method in which you utilize Maiden facing your back. So what you can do when you're in a stalemate with the enemy at the tower and can't really push for a lead is that you can use Maiden to poke the enemy. Maiden will hit whoever's nearest to her, and because she is ranged, you can stand a bit of a distance away and face opposite to the tower, and Maiden will run near the tower to poke the enemy. I will say this is really hard to get used to and requires a lot of precise movements, as Maiden can really easily go deep into the tower, so it's important to keep your distance. To control her movement, you have to stand away a certain distance around Maiden so that you can easily pull her back. It's basically like pulling somebody from bungee jumping on the rope. If you get close to Maiden, it won't do anything. If you're far away, you can walk back and pull Maiden away. If the enemy champion tries to kill your Maiden, then you can quickly pull her back and then all in the enemy top because they just committed to your waifu. Never leave your waifu alone. Now, for the final point on Maiden, releasing Maiden. This is another really common question.
Hey Shagdag, when do I release Maiden?
And the answer is pretty much never. There are only 3 situations I ever released Maiden. When I notice Maiden and I are getting chased and will probably die, I release Maiden so that it dies faster and maybe distracts the enemy. That way I can get away safely and so that the cooldown starts ticking quicker. This is paired really well with Seruda's Grudge, where it will also slow the enemy when you release her and you can just run away more easily. Now you might be thinking, isn't that horribly immoral? Aren't you basically just leaving your real life wife into the zombie apocalypse and leaving her to die? Yes, I am. Welcome to the isolating life of being a Yorick main. Why would you need your partner when you have your right hand? Second situation is when I am running away from a fight, but I still want to help out in the fight. Rarely, whenever I do team fight and of course lose my health due to the fight and can't really help, I'll oftentimes release my Maiden to hit the enemy. How this works is that whenever you release Maiden, she'll always try to hit whatever enemy she sees on the way towards her nearest lane. So this means that as long as Maiden was helping you in the team fight, releasing her while in combat will keep her to continue hitting the enemy. After the fight's over, of course, she'll naturally just run down the lane until she dies. The final situation I release Maiden is actually using it for its intended purpose. When it's hard late game where I'm 5+ items and my teammates are getting pressured really hard on the base and they need me, I'll pretty much always try to slip push anyways. But let's say hypothetically, I'm feeling more empathetic on that specific day and the wave isn't quite pushed up as much as I want to, then I will sometimes release Maiden to shove a side lane and join my team to defend. What this does is it will allow a time on the enemy's push where if they don't do anything within the given time, Maiden will slowly push and get to the enemy's base and I can throw in a TP backdoor play. It also guarantees a situation where if they lose the fight, I can just TP to Maiden and end the game. Regardless, it forces a situation where the enemy has to do or die. I don't do this very often though because obviously it's just better to push with Maiden, as releasing Maiden will make a very slow movement speed and the wave clear isn't even that good. But it's a solid option if you think you can help and need to win the 5v5. Note that this is pretty much only useful at level 16 plus because anything less than 3 points Maiden just gets destroyed by tower and is really shit at pushing. Now that we've finished talking about Maiden, I can finally start to remember to talk about Yorick's W. This ability has a huge skill ceiling and I'm about to reveal the secrets of it right now. So with this skill, the first thing you'll learn is to know how to cage somebody. Simple, that's how it's meant to be used. But the second thing you'll quickly learn is that it is a great tool to escape and run away with. Having it just be a big circle in the way of the enemy can often deter a lot of champions and allow space for your teammates to run away. But there's also a lot of other ways you can use it too. Sometimes you don't even need to use it as a way to escape or cage the enemy, but instead you can use it as a path blocker. Something as simple as eliminating an area for the enemy to move in can heavily mess with their movements. And sometimes if you do a really nutty war, you can even completely change their path, which can get them killed. You can also use the W as a prediction tool. One of the most common ways I use it is through placing the W on a place the enemy might flash into. Because it's a cage, when they flash over, they'll just be stuck in a box. And it's incredibly awkward and make them seem like a moron and you like a Greek god intelligent creature. However, the most useful way you use W in a weird way is through minion blocking. With Yorick, you can block minion waves and delay them, making them take the scenic route for just putting your W in certain spots. This is really useful for 3 reasons. 1. It protects the minion waves and won't let them focus on hitting a tower, which means you can get plates and destroy his towers quicker. This also has a side effect of having the minion wave push slower towards the tower, so that when you reset, it will take longer before the enemy wave crashes to your tower. It stores out time and can block out the enemy champion himself from getting back to the lane, which gives you more time to get the tower. This helps a lot because every second in the early game could mean the difference between getting a plate and not getting a plate. I do this incredibly frequently and it can be even used to delay the enemy wave so that your wave crashes first. Of course the tower will target the wall and hit it, but that tiny bit of time is often more than enough for the minions to crash. The final way to use W effectively is as a defensive mechanism for dives. In general, Yorick cannot do anything against dives due to not having any survivability or CC to do anything about it. Particularly in the early game where you have no damage to even dissuade the enemy, you can oftentimes just be free food for the enemy jungler and will get spam ganked. So what you can do with Yorick is make it a real struggle for the enemy to be able to kill you, and that's just by wrapping yourself with the cage like a blanket. When you wrap yourself around with the W, the enemy will have to go into the cage to hit you, but if they do that, they'll be stuck in the cage and will receive aggro and won't be able to get out. Note that this doesn't work against ranged champions, but against melee champions like Camille who might eat into the box, does it work amazingly. And besides, any way to defend yourself as Yorick, you'll take it. This is really effective against more short range champions like Tryndamere or Yi, who can only auto attack to get to you. And you can also combine this with playing Ring Around a Rosie as well, where if they eat into the cage, you can just walk out and they just stuck in the cage and they can't do anything about it. Now let's move on to GP. Not gay porn, but Ghoul Pushing. After a few games of Arc, you might have noticed, what the heck? Why are the ghouls so weird? This is because ghouls have two modes. Independent mode and slave. Independent mode is when they go on their own and push. This is activated whenever they hit an enemy, of which they will just run down the nearest lane and push until they die. Slave mode is when they're freshly spawned and haven't hit anything yet, and thus they'll also follow you until they see something and then they run down and become independent. So this technique abuses ghouls going into independent mode, where they'll go on a silent and push to help you get farm and EXP. So with this trick, you want to have ghouls following you like a slave, or spawn ghouls when they're pushing a wave. And then you're just gonna push like a normal human being, and then the ghouls will run down and get you money XP. During this time where they're pushing, you can do whatever you want. So something I like doing is recalling and going to another lane to pressure. What this will do is the ghouls will pressure on that lane and will continuously shove until they die, getting you money XP. And if you go another lane to pressure, you can just have two lanes of pressure at the same time. Another thing you can do is when you have ghouls out and you send them to push the wave, you can create more graves in that wave, and after the ghouls leave a certain threshold of your passive range, you can spawn the ghouls to yourself, that way you aren't as weak. And hey, now you have 4 ghouls pushing the lane and 4 ghouls by your side, 4 slaves. With these 4 ghouls, we're gonna do something really cool next, and that's called... Yorick is really good at soloing Baron. Once you're level 16, you can just splurge out Maiden and ghouls and rock his shit up. Let the ghouls do the work and tank for you, and you and Maiden can have a nice honeymoon vacation with cutie patootie Baron. Threesome, baby. But if you really want to take it up a notch and solo at 20 minutes under dot, chances are you won't be level 16. And if you spawn Maiden and try to rizz up Baron, you're gonna end up like Grand Dada. RIP to him. So in order to solo Baron at early levels, you need to have 4 ghouls before you start the Baron. Preferably full HP and not have ult active. If you have ult active, you cannot solo Baron. What these 4 ghouls are gonna do is they're gonna DPS the Baron and tank it, and should get a good amount of damage onto Baron. Note that you have to have these ghouls tank for you. If you tank, you do 50% reduced damage. After 3 ghouls die, you'll want to summon Maiden. Not too close, otherwise she'll tank Baron, and then you can finish off the Baron from there. I have to reiterate, throughout the fight, you need the ghouls to tank, because if Baron aims you, you are not going to be able to do it. This is also the prime reason why Yorick can solo Baron. Because one ghoul soaks up that 50% damage reduction, you'll be doing the full juicy big damage. You're gonna need to know how to do this, because in situations where Dragon and Baron is active, and your teammates and enemies suddenly swing their dicks around Dragon, you can quickly solo Baron, and from that position on, it doesn't matter if the enemy wins the fight, because you just got a goddamn Baron. Now for this little segment of teaching you guys stuff, I'm just gonna quickly rapid fire advice and text for Yorick and other small stuff you can do to improve your gameplay. There's far too many things to talk about with Yorick, and I'll be honest, it will take an entire millennium to tell everything about Yorick, so here it is. Yorick W can block 1 tower shot, so one thing you can do is E the enemy and W under tower to protect your ghouls and Maiden from 1 tower shot, or place it right before you go into tower range, that way you save time walking towards the tower. This will help you start DPSing the tower quicker, and obviously any time saved matters of the essence, especially when you go for the big back doors. If you're gonna Triforce or any Sheen item, if you want the highest consistent DPS to win longer fights, remember to optimize all of your Sheen procs. How you can do this is space out your abilities and just watch your Triforce cooldown, making sure you're constantly proccing it. This matters a lot in 2 situations, the early game and destroying towers. Every Shin proc adds a lot of extra damage, especially if you have a stacked up Triforce. Now this is a bit hard to get used to in fights because you have to focus on so many things at once, and also the fact that E and W on really long cooldowns, it may be a struggle to do this. So here's one super secret strategy to do this easily. You can do it anytime you want. You can release Maiden to get a guaranteed Shin proc. Now obviously this comes at the cost of releasing Maiden, but when you're in a do or die situation, it is trivial. One fight could mean the difference in a win or loss. The funny part about this Maiden Release Shin proc strategy is that this is probably the most efficient way to use Maiden Release right now. Another concept that I didn't talk about and I haven't talked about much is the 40-second rule. 40 seconds is the amount of time I can last with a girl, as well as Yorick going from T2 tower to destroying the Nexus. Obviously there are a lot of factors in play such as having fewer or less items, minion waves, foreplay, etc. But 40 seconds is a general ballpark. Although I tilt a lot on stream, if I ever find the enemy team's patterns ignoring the side lanes or something like that, I always have a hope that I can maybe salvage a game through a backdoor. With that being said, that's most of the strategies that I've thought up about Yorick specifically, and I'm now going to teach you my final tech of Yorick that's by far the most overpowered, and that is to become Yorick. You must not be affected by your teammates, by tilt or any emotions at all. I know this is a really common advice and everything, but seriously, playing Yorick already makes your teammates grumbly, and going lethality will only piss them off even more. The second you flame your teammates though, you've lost the game. Maybe not the game of League necessarily, but the game of becoming Yorick. To become Yorick, you have to become a moving, transition into ascendancy. Oh, also, yeah, another really important thing is we're gonna get ghouls and stuff. If you don't have any ghouls, you're gonna be missing out a lot of damage, and yeah, I guess that's slightly more valuable, but you know, screw you guys. For this final segment, I want to go through a couple of games where I demonstrate Yorick techs and how it helps me. I'm also going to go through fundamentals that I may or may not have talked about, and we're going to have a grand old time. Finally, I just want to tell everybody that items and runes are all prone to change, and obviously I can't change the video every patch. However, I will be posting updating items and runes on my Discord, as well as on my Twitch with a command, so join in the description, and if you want more Yorick, or just stuff about him in general, feel free to subscribe. Because if you subscribe, you can learn how to play him, and relax and enjoy my overwhelming charisma. Also, I have a second channel primarily for other videos, so there's that. I don't know how to segue this, so here it is. So one thing I didn't really talk about was, before laning phase, you don't want to really learn any abilities until you actually get to lane. The reason for this is because you need to see how the enemy laner plays first. If the enemy laner plays really upfront and aggressive you can learn Q to fight back, or you can learn E to farm safely from afar. For example, against Riven, if she's sitting at the first 3 melee minions, you have to learn E so you can farm from afar. But if she walks up to your caster minions and tries to fight you, you have to learn Q to fight back and to also get the XP with the first 3 melee minions. You can see in this Ornn matchup, I learned Q because I noticed he was playing a bit more safer. I did get poked a little bit, but ultimately it wasn't that big of a threat because Ornn doesn't have much poke threat early game. Over here, I put an extra point to Q. And the reason I put an extra point to Q is to help me farm more easily to last hit better. Another thing is I don't think at all I'm going to get any kill pressure on Ornn. Having a point to W at level 3 is very powerful if you go for a big all-in, but because I'm playing as a very tanky champion, I'd rather have the extra damage in Q. That way if I do engage, I have more threat like that. This is a bit long of rambling, but basically, I value the damage and cooldown of Q over a point into W at level 3 specifically. Obviously level 4, I put a point into W. Also, after I finish shoving a wave, I actually go out of my way to go back and get into the range of Q to awaken the ghouls. That way I have 4 ghouls to help shove this next wave so I can easily get it over and done with. This position is not exactly the best for me. I do know the enemy jungler is not topside, however in general you don't want to be here, right? And obviously Ornn goes for a delayed E and I am able to get a really nice trade and poke him down really hard. After I landed an E, I actually considered staying to maybe auto Q him on the tower to kill him. And had I done it in a more, you know, if I was feeling more confident, I would have probably did it, but because I just wanted a more consistent game, I decided to get a good back instead. Here's a nice little clip. It's pretty interesting because it shows once you're level 6, the enemy champions just gun straight for Maiden. People know in high elo especially that Maiden is a really important tool for Yorick. So what do? They just bloody go for it. They just kill you, you know? And obviously this is a really bad for him. I actually am able to solo kill him because of that. And it's a 1-for-1, but obviously this favors me because he has a really bad wave and I still have teleport. But the lesson you should take from here is that be observant of Maiden. Sometimes you can use Maiden to bait the enemy and then you can turn back and kill them, and more often than not, I've actually gotten a lot of kills from that way. Also, I just wanted to show you this clip because I wanted to show you guys not necessarily how strong Yorick is, but how weak he is to ganks more so. You can see here, if you ever get ganked by the enemy jungler, you're just you're just free food. There's absolutely nothing you can do. So yeah, remember to track the enemy jungler. Keep some fundamentals in your head. Hey, where's the enemy jungler? Missing an apple for 3 minutes? Maybe he's topside. Now earlier I was talking about using Maiden to bait, and I wanted to demonstrate this again. Well, not really, but I want to demonstrate how you can use it to get a solo kill in a really weird way. So start off this situation, Ornn's full HP, you can see he's really hungry for Maiden, and I noticed that, right? So I try to abuse it. Every time he goes deep for Maiden, I turn back, and I just go boom, go for a big trade. At this point, he's below half HP, I can get a really nice dive on him, and he has to back right now. But if he backs, he does pretty much miss the entire tower and wave, so he can't back. So now I have a position where I can maybe poke for him, so you can see me manipulating Maiden, messing around with his AI, and I use it to end up poking him. And even though he gets a W in him, because I'm so close, if he tries to go for another W hit, I'll just kill him. And obviously, even though Maiden does die here, which is pretty sad, you can see that Maiden did 600 damage in that one little segment there. And at this point, he's so low, I'm just gonna straight up kill him, and there's not much he can really do. You see he tries to go for ult here, but I do something called ability buffering. I don't know if I'll talk about this in the guide, I absolutely forgot because I'm a moron. When you see the enemy about to use an ability, they get stuck in an animation. During this animation lock, you can use an E, use a Q, and cast it, and it'll basically guarantee hit them. And because I know Ornn's obviously going to ram the ult into me, I cast E at my feet, guaranteeing it. Obviously you could do some crazy mind game like, I don't know, ult backwards, but then if you ults backwards, then there's another issue at hand. But yeah, remember my previous advice, jungle is a weak role. And this is the final play that I wanted to really go over, and that was just a 1v2 against enemy jungle and top laner. The one thing you might notice instantly is I get a really nice W and I lock Echo in, and obviously I'm able to do a lot of damage to him. And you can see right before he ults, I don't know if you noticed, I am fully stacked Conqueror and I'm ready to get that last Q pop on him. You know, you can see the idea, and even though it doesn't work out because I did so much damage to him with the W and the ghouls and Maiden DPS, I was able to kill him effectively. I think another really interesting thing I didn't notice watching back on this fight is Echo actually orders a ghoul, and another concept that I'm not 100% sure talking about. I do mention it in my matchups guide on my spreadsheet, but if you stand over your ghouls or ghouls and maiden, basically stand over your maidens and ghouls, it makes it really hard for the enemy, particularly to hit you. Like basically it makes it impossible to properly target a specific unit. Another segment I wanted to go over was this fight in particular against an Aatrox I played against. But you might have noticed when he tries to run away, I have this Serratus slow, and I get a really nice E predict on him. And the concept I'm trying to explain is basically just save your E for when the enemy dashes. Against champions with frequent dashes, you should not E just out of nowhere unless you're just planning to poke them. If you're in a fight though, E after they dash and boom, guaranteed. I want to talk about this game as well because it was really interesting. It was a game where I made a lot of blunders in lane. I had a really easy lane as well. I'm playing against an Ornn again, woohoo, and he went Cull, so technicality I should kill him a billion times. But no, I suck and I get really unlucky and I get punished. I become careless, I get ganked all the time by Yi, and I end up having a really bad scoreline of dying over I think 4 times. And even though I have a very bad scoreline, I do want to emphasize a concept with Yorick, and that's just that as a champion who's going to be all about breaking towers and getting objectives, and also very independent of teammates, so you don't really join stuff related to teammates, fundamentally, you're going to have shit scorelines. You can see even though I'm 0-4 in this clip, I just go absolutely mental. I destroy. My damage is absolutely not an issue. And yeah, it seems like my team is winning, but you can see as the game goes on more and more, the game is slipping out of our hand. So what's one way where we can make games that are kind of slipping out of control and getting into an unsafe territory, especially against the super fed Yi who's 12, 5, and 3, has 15 out of 17 KP on the enemy team? What's one way we can circumvent that? My idea was to just solo Baron. We had a really good dev timer that had just died at Dragon, and I'm a 2-4 Yorick. Who the hell would ever expect a 2-4 Yorick to solo Baron? You can see our teammates as well being like, what the hell? A 2-4 Yorick just solo Baron? And with this Baron, it pretty much ensures our victory. Having 1,500 gold spread across the entire team, and pretty much an entire level spread across everyone else as well, very hard to come back from. And that's the funny thing and ironic thing about Yorick. It's definitely my favorite part as well. The worse score you have on Yorick, the less people expect from you, and the more powerful you become. And at this point, I'm a 2-4 Yorick with almost over 3 items and nobody can even match me. You see these all on who's the same level and similar items. Let's see the 1v1 matchup. You can see I just quickly clean up over almost 1/4 of his HP. Simple just like that. Obviously I'll leave because I just want to be safe. But you can see I am not lacking in the damage department. Against a full tank as well? God damn! Okay, that was a pretty lame example. Doing 1/4 of a tank's health in damage even though I have percent of damage. Who cares? Well, I'll just show you this clip, right? Yeah, enough said. And by the end of the game, I went from being a 0-4 Yorick to earning the respect of all my teammates and being the highest damage on the team in itself. Did I change the course of that game? Were we gonna win it anyways had I not done all of that? Who knows? But it's the fact that you can still do a lot of things and pretty much guarantee victories through pure unadulterated will. Wait, no, that was not the lesson. Yorick is pretty good. There, that's the story. Anyways, guys, this is the end of the line, the end of the guide of this very video. And finally, although it is the end of the Yorick guide, it's the beginning of many new Yorick mains, I feel. And for anybody who even considers playing Yorick right now, now go out there and give them hell, you rat bags!